We're about to dive into another episode of Running with Scissors, the podcast that helps you understand who and what you truly are in the world. Buckle up as we unpack strategies to unlock your full potential so you can stop running with scissors and get the most out of your life, work, and relationships. Let's go!
I love
Welcome
that.
back into Running with Scissors. Way, do you like the intro?
I do. You know, we can create a little bit more richness in the feminine voice, and it's rock and roll time. I love it.
So shout out to 11 Labs. I put that together. I felt naked. We recorded an episode yesterday and I was like, oh, there's no intro music. There's no nothing. We just hit record, and that's not my style of doing podcasts. So threw it together in like 30 minutes today, and here we are.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, we can beef up that voice a little bit, and then it's just gonna keep getting better. And that's the whole point of what HumanOp is all about. It's a constant evolution, constant optimization process in everything that we do in life, because if we're not optimizing, growing, then we are dying, right? So
I hear you. I say we have our amazing co-founder Lisa, who we talked about yesterday.
yes.
She needs to narrate the intro and the outro because her voice is magical.
Yep. And for those of you who have the app already and have gotten your results before, Lisa is the voice behind the video results. So
That's right. You have Lisa in your pocket 24/7.
anytime, press play.
She's going to hate us. Lisa, we're so sorry.
Yeah.
That's all right. Well, yesterday we talked about, or last episode, we talked about the evolution of HumanOp, how we got here. We touched on the app a little bit. Hopefully, if you listen to that episode, you already downloaded your version of the app and you're in there experimenting with it. But today I want to hear the business context of HumanOp, because you've worked with a ton of people. You've also worked with a ton of companies over the last decade. And that's only growing, and we have different ways to do that now. But that's where we met. We met in the business world, and you've done some really cool things there and worked with just crazy people and companies. I want to hear how that came about, because a lot of people or a lot of companies really struggle with their people. And it's probably one of the biggest costs in any company is issues associated with people. So where did HumanOp get the idea to go into the corporate world first? And what did that look like with you and Lisa?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think one of the things I identified even before HumanOp was, at the end of the day, there's a human being that is at the root of the success and failure of any organization, right? I mean, until we get to a point where we have AI machines starting and running entire companies, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon. It still requires.
Kind of sounds like the Matrix, so maybe we don't go there.
Maybe we don't go there. But before the integration of HumanOp into my world, I was already focusing and realizing that spending years being a brand strategist, helping people create systems and processes to grow their business, not really thinking about the people, and then waking up one day and wondering why this system should be flawless. Why is there still problems, right? And the way I'd like to describe it is that, you can create a system and a process in an organization that is so bulletproof that, as a lot of people say, even a monkey could run it, right? But if that monkey shows up the next day with a hangover, shows up completely unoptimized and tired, doesn't know or doesn't push the button at the right time, that system will still fail, right? At the end of the day, and this is kind of how the synergism between you, Sean, and we all came together with this, and Lisa, when we were working on how to scale businesses limitlessly, right? You guys were approaching it from this bulletproof process and systematic approach of simplifying the process of growing and scaling an organization. And we were both talking the same language and coming it from opposite ends to meet in the middle. And this is how it happened. We focused on the root of it all, which is that human being that is responsible for executing those systems and processes, right? And so how it got into that, what I found when I started to integrate HumanOp ULT technology into what I was already doing, it was phenomenal. I had a client where we took her business from 1 million, almost 1 million a year in a very short period of time to like 12 million valuation in spanning across 6 different other companies within the same industry. And when I started to introduce this technology into her world, she says, I want to show you something, Wade, just like a true testament to your understanding of the human condition, that even before this technology, what this technology has revealed is that you were already on point. These were the things that we were already working on, and this technology just validated everything that you've been doing with us for the last few years. And so a lot of people will say, oh, this HumanOp thing is new. It's nothing that we didn't know before, whatever the case may be. Actually, it's an opportunity for those of us who have figured stuff out to use an objective technology to validate our process and to reveal some of the other gaps that we may have thought we intuited properly, but we're still sort of off, right? So we're not here to say like, oh my God, what you're doing is wrong. There are elements, what everybody is doing in their organization, that is spot on. And yet there are a lot of things that are contributing to our struggles of how we aren't growing or evolving or operating in the most optimal way. And what our technology has been able to do is reveal those gaps. I like to say, like, a lot of what Lisa and I was doing in that capacity before we really took off on the HumanOp side and focused on the technology and developing the app and the SaaS and everything, was what I like to call gap spackling, right? We're identifying the gaps within your organization, within your teams, within a human being, and then we present a spackle to allow you to bridge that gap and start to optimize. And that's why our focus is always on optimization. We're not here to say there's anything that somebody's doing wrong. Let's just help you do it better, right? So
yeah, and I can't speak to the extent of what myself and Sean were doing, because we'll have Sean on a later episode and he can share all of that. But what you said is so true, right? Like you go at the people, we went at the structure of the company and the systems, yeah, on a micro degree. But at the end of the day, you have one person change and it messes up the entire ecosystem. And Sean, far better than me at intuiting those people and those pieces. He's an absolute magician at that. But
right.
if you have a whole team of people and one or two things change or new opportunities come up, you have to, in some cases, start from scratch. And
Right.
that's the uniqueness of the HumanOp technology, is just being able to know instead of guessing. You don't waste any time.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the bringing this to especially larger corporations. I always find that interesting, because small businesses and entrepreneurs, while it's a shift and it's an adjustment,
Right.
they're usually more willing to adopt and sort of pivot, if you will. But larger corporations, you have these massive ships, right? But
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
guys have gone in and you've made a huge difference. So over the years, do you have
Mm-hmm.
any notable clients? You don't have to name them, but like notable
Yeah.
stories about transition in that corporate-y world, so to speak?
Yeah, it's such an interesting world we live in, because there's a sensitivity, because we're working directly with the human beings. The types of NDAs we have to deal with, that are people, you'd be surprised. The NDAs around working directly with the human component is so much more ironclad than even their IP. It's a fascinating thing. So without mentioning it, it's a Fortune 500 company. They had a silo issue. And what I mean by that is they had multiple teams all doing the same thing under a international sales division, right? And they were frustrated. They were beyond curious. They were frustrated why certain teams would excel. They were rocking it, and other teams doing the same thing just struggled from 1 month to the next to hit their goals, to produce the numbers that the company expects them to produce. And so what that eventually evolved into is a distortion and an unhealthy set of silos. Instead of being a competitive, it became almost like infighting between each of these teams into a toxic competitive culture. It wasn't competitive in a healthy way, it was competitive in a toxic way. So what that means is oftentimes we'll see this in larger organizations that they will run sabotage strategies in order to not get below the other person, versus healthy competition, which is like, hey, let's do this. It's, oh my God, you guys are doing great. Well, okay, we're going to step up our game, that type of thing. So when we were brought in, was like, what's going on here? And I said, okay, great. Well, instead of finding out who's right, who's wrong, because those are human-made constructs anyway, let's objectively understand the distinction between these teams. Because even though these teams are all doing the same thing under the same structure of the organizations, you have to recognize that each team is a unique combination of different human beings. No two teams are going to perform and going to be alike, right? If you start to compare two teams in terms of performance numbers, that is the introduction of failure. They're basically set up to fail, or at least one of the teams are, right? So what we did was we went in there and we said, okay, well, let's look at the best performing team and see what kind of human beings are in there. And sure enough, they had human beings that had very minimal gaps between. They covered each other's gaps. Then we took our technology into another team, which was the worst performing team by their standards. And we looked at what was going on, and there were gaps everywhere. You had too many leaders, not enough doers, and not one strategist in the entire group, right? It didn't matter what they did before and how they perform in a different company, everything like that. That was just kind of the nature. And our technology is able to objectively reveal who are the true natural born leaders, who are the true taskmasters, who are the great nurturers and supporters of the team, and who are the actual strategists. And then so what we then did was this, is like, okay, great. Are we open to restructure the dynamics of the team? Because what we can also identify is the compatibility factor. Okay, there is a compatibility algorithm that we have on the back end of our Maestro app that can help you, give you a compatibility score just by dragging and dropping a bunch of people together. So what we then did was, and this is back before we had the technology, so we did it on a consultative model, taking what we already been doing for other organizations. And we made a template of the best performing team to show the powers that may be in an organization. This is the template. What we need to do is find people that match this template and reshuffle the different teams. And so we reshuffled a bunch of teams together, and we said, okay, now, even though we reshuffled and they're going to perform better, also keep in mind, every team should have their own performance return on investment, so to speak. And what we mean by that is, when you hire somebody, companies see them as human capital. I hate that. It's more like you're investing in this person, and there's a certain ROI, there's certain return on this investment. Companies and corporations have gotten so lazy that they invest in one person, they expect that one person to perform just like everybody else as their ROI. That is, I don't know if it's lazy HR or lazy leadership, but that's an old paradigm. And the reason why we can't fault anybody for doing that, because there hasn't been a technology that has been able to scientifically and objectively identify the distinction between one human being's performance ROI metric and another human being's performance ROI metric. So after we rearranged the teams and everyone's like, oh my God, this is great, people are performing better already. Now we had to say, now let's stop comparing each team to each other, and that which is contributing to this toxic competitive culture. Let's have each team have their own performance metric that they have to hit. And then whether or not they hit it, that's the competition, not whether or not they hit the same number as that other group. When that shifted, that was the most difficult one, because think about it. It's a Fortune 500 company that has been doing this for decades. And they're just like, no, this is not how things are done. It says, well, do you want to change this toxic competitive culture, which is contributing to lower performance, loss of funds, laying people off, hiring people, which is a very costly endeavor? Or do you want to take advantage of all those you have here, assets that you already have, and optimize and maximize their output sustainably? And so that's what we did. We ended up going in there, and the silos disappeared. The culture, the toxic culture that existed there before, it started to go down and became more and more mitigated, and it got to a point where the healthy competition started to step in on its own, One, because everybody was sustainably motivated in the position that we're supposed to be in, and production wasn't about competing to see what we can do to beat that other person's score, but whether or not each team hit their goals, their own unique goals within that organization. Completely changed the game. And from what I understood, because they were struggling from it was a new location that they launched on the East Coast, that it actually saved that location from getting a kind of like a bad score compared to the rest of the properties in the rest of the nation. So
that's cool. Yeah. So you said Fortune 500. The company's obviously massive. These two teams, how many people were on each team?
So on each team, on average, it was anywhere from 6 to 10. Okay. So 6 to 10 people on each team, and just depending on what it was. So the optimal template ended up being around 7 to 8 people. So we reshuffled things around and just kept it at that ideal point. Now, the reason why it would be more or less is because they didn't have the specific strategist, or they didn't have enough task masters. So we compensated by, adding extra people who the combination would actually fill in that gap. Right?
So that whole process that you described, the evaluating the individuals, creating the templates, the performance ROI, all the other stuff, how long did that take for you? Was it you and Lisa at the time? How long did that take you two to go through?
So this was a project that before Lisa actually joined me on these projects. So it was just me. This one took a better part of a year.
Oof.
So if you can imagine the year of putting this all together, and what also, because business didn't stop. So during the optimization, there was a lot of shuffling that happened. Then suddenly people would disappear, or new people would be brought on, and be like, oh God, you guys are killing me here. You're killing me, Smalls, because I just got this just right, and now you're adding something else to the mix, right? And that's the beautiful thing, is once you have everything set up and stuff like that, these teams will dynamically adapt to new individuals that come in. The culture will shift to the removal of a human being, the adding of another human being. Because anytime you remove a human being or add another human being, and this is where corporate culture gets it all wrong, it's archaic, it's not resilient enough, is because the minute you add another human being, or you take another human being out of a group dynamic, the culture already changes. The assumption that phrase that we hear a lot is like, oh, great hire, bad fit. No, that means you have a terrible culture that can't adapt to human beings. That's what that really means. Instead of blaming it on that human being that was a great hire, it's a great hire, why didn't they fit? Because your culture sucks. It's not built to adapt quick enough, right? And this is where we get hires and layoffs and everything like that, is because the culture is not resilient enough and adaptable enough to be able to adjust to changing dynamics in the workforce, changing dynamics in the environment, in the industry. What our technology has been able to do is create that level of adaptability and resilience through understanding the natural objective nature of the human beings that are there, and how the addition and removal of a human being can impact the culture, and what then needs to be happening with that gap that is revealed, and what specific spackle you can use for that gap to either maintain the culture or improve the culture. We just don't know. Every human being is different. Every dynamic combination of human being is different. Now, historically, it takes a long time because it's a consultative model. But now, with our technology, you can literally do that within minutes.
Don't burst the bubble. We're going to get there. You already did once. You spoiled the surprise. You said Maestro. We'll get there. I promise. But I'm also curious. So back to last episode, when we talked about understanding yourself objectively through the eyes of the technology. Can't speak today. Bringing that into the business world, and when somebody is hired or leaves a team or goes somewhere else, how much of that plays a role into it? Just being able to present that person to the team and say, objectively, here's who and what this person is. Here's where they're going to fit in with the rest of you. Here's where they're going to clash with maybe some of you.
Right.
And just knowing that to kind of set the tone for the culture,
Right.
rather than just waiting to see what happens. Is there validity in that?
Yeah. Fundamentally, let's talk about why human conflict exists, right? a lot of times human beings, in an effort to survive, we have to establish meaning of experiences that we have, right? Why? Because we weren't raised to objectively understand what's happening. So everything is filtered through our lens of our value systems, our experiences, our traumas, our good and bad, the determinations of what things are and how people should be. And every culture is different, every society is different, every country is different. So fundamentally, how conflict exists between two human beings, you got one human being that has a set value system and perception of the world and how they make meaning of what happens in the world to them, right? Or what happens around them. You have another human being has a whole separate set of value systems and everything and how they perceive the world. That's why you can sit in the car with two people. One will have road rage and one is totally confused about why the person is raging, right? There's different meanings made based on your past experiences, based on your psychological traumas and how you were raised and the definitions of things in the world. You put two people together that are very different and they don't understand what's happening. Now, our academic system punishes us or teaches us to fear punishment of not knowing an answer. Like, I don't know what's going on, right? And to be able to admit that, especially in a toxic corporate culture, is the kiss of death. So, oh, this person is stupid. She doesn't know what's going on. Okay, well, we got to put a flag on this one, right? So what happens is instead of saying the truth, which is, I don't know what's happening and I don't understand this human being, what they do is they take their own value system and they reevaluate the actions or what they're experiencing on that other human being and filter it through their own perception of life, their own value system to try to understand what's happening, like as if I did what they did. But if I did what I did, I would judge myself as being bad and wrong. That's the problem. And the other side's doing the same thing. And that's when conflict exists. That's when conflict happens, right? So you take that dynamic and you introduce a new human being in. If that human being, God forbid, does something that they don't understand, and this person is going to come here to shake things up and make things better and disrupt what was not working from before, but the people on the team are like, I don't understand what this person is doing. I don't understand this human being. Let's reevaluate it through my lens of what I would do if I was him. But you're not him. Doesn't matter. I don't care. If I was him, okay, yeah, he's totally off the rocker. He doesn't get us, right? Nope, I am not doing what he's doing. Nope, I'm putting my foot down. And we see this all the time. It's nobody's fault, really, because we're all just doing that to survive. What the technology affords each of us the ability to do is, first and foremost, move away from the judgment of good, bad, right, and wrong. We come from the ethos that no human being there's nothing wrong with any human being. They either are like nature and chemistry and physics. They are either operating from a strong state expression of self, an optimal state of expression of self, or a weak state expression of self. How we know this to be true, if you're listening to this, just think about the last time you were hangry, last time you were hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and you were just not in the best place. And instead of telling the world that, hey, I'm really tired, I don't have the capacity or the fuse to be able to handle what's going on right now, so please forgive me for acting out. No, instead we just act through that lens and say, hey, the world sucks right now and I'm going to snap at everybody that comes my way, right? In our world, we say they're simply in the weak state expression of themselves. And if the receiving end of that weak state expression understands objectively what is happening to that human being in that moment, guess what? Think about the amount of judgment and bias that starts to go away, because honestly, Brent, in my world right now, because this is so integrated into my ecosystem, I know if I'm judging somebody for their weak state expression of stuff and I'm getting angry, that is 100% my choice at that point. It is so frustratingly difficult for me to stay upset at somebody because it's my choice, because I know what state they're in. I can tell objectively what's happening in that moment. And it's not for me to judge. It's for me to recognize, like, yeah, they're probably not in their optimal state right now. And I can totally see where it's coming from. So let me wait, or let me pause, or not take it personally. Imagine if everybody can do that. I use the example all the time. Let's say you don't like the color green, and like it makes you viscerally sick, right? Like it makes you like, I'm gonna throw up. Does that mean every day?
I heard it from our steward of brand that you don't like the color green. Did I hear that correctly?
No. No, but let's say you didn't like that, or anybody who's listening to this right now, right? Does that mean that you're going to go out every day, pop a squat next to a patch of grass and scream and yell at it and blame it every day, all day long, for being green because you don't like the color green? No, you're not. Why? Because grass is just what? Green. Imagine looking at every human being that way, that instead of taking personal offense and you recognize what's going on. Now, that doesn't excuse them from being toxic. That doesn't excuse them from operating from a weak state and creating collateral damage, not recognizing they are operating from a weak state. But at the very least, it can help the individual not go into this slippery slope of judgment, bias, resentment, and trauma, even because someone is acting or expressing themselves from a weak state and you are taking it personally. Right.
Yeah, it's powerful too. And when you really get ingrained in the technology, you can start to, at least I start to make it a game of like, what weak state behavior is that, or do I think it is? Not so I can go up and help them or do anything
Right.
like that, but for myself, right? Like to
Mhm.
to name a behavior and not associate it necessarily with the person. The only time I make
Right.
blanket judgments about people is what airlines they fly and what hotels they stay in. And I can't get past that. It's just my own thing, right? But I accept it. That's just who I am. I can live with that. All right. So
Mm.
I did have an interesting encounter with this, with understanding the technology and applying it in real time a couple of weeks ago with one of our clients. Actually, the client that both you and I started working on together before we came together as HumanOp, and one of their employees, we were meeting together. We never really got along, and I personally didn't understand it until she verbalized it.
Mhm.
We had to have a one-on-one and just go over building something she was doing with their software in the back end. And she admitted, she's like, I was so nervous to meet with you because our alchemies are so far apart that like I get anxious being around you. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. I know we're not diving into alchemy today. It's a subsection of the technology. But
Right.
she's like, I actually get nervous in meetings if I'm there too long with you and like doing this stuff where it has to look nice. I know
Yep.
I'm not going to make it look pretty, and that's what you expect. And I was like, that is so powerful. We can work around that now.
Yeah. It's an understanding that mitigates the charge of judgment and bias. And it's a fascinating thing. If you've already taken the assessment or have access to the technology, what Brand is referring to is the number one reason why relationships of any kind, be it business or personal, become challenged is what we like to call alchemic dissonance. If you happen to have gone through this, you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, highly encourage you to go to your results to the alchemy section. And just listening to Lisa talk about your specific alchemy will help you understand what I'm talking about. Why alchemy is the source of some of the most contentious dynamics, and it's just nature at work. I mean, when we look at alchemy and refinement, you look into nature, you see a standing pond, like has no running movement in there, right? And then you see a healthy roaring river that is flowing down a mountain. And if you look at the ecosystem, the type of animals and the type of fauna and the type of flora that's all there, it's completely different. Humans are no different. When we can understand the alchemic refinement and between one human being to another, what you described right there, Brandon, is a perfect example of where that misunderstanding of the dissonance and then taking it personally could get in the way of a productive meeting. Whereas when they now eventually it'll be interesting for her to recognize that she doesn't have to be nervous about it, just understand that whoever she is speaking to also understands it as well. And then we're just one big happy family. It says, by the way, I apologize for my alchemy because I know your alchemy is different from mine. And it just is what it is.
That's where we're going to get to. And now we can dive into Maestro, because what took you a year to do is now potentially a couple clicks of a mouse
Yeah.
away from being a reality from companies. So I want to hear a little bit about, our initial offering of Maestro and sort of
Mhm.
the magic that's going to be able to happen in organizations with the key components that we're building into it first and foremost. So talk me through that same situation with this Fortune 500 company using Maestro, which they have not done, but the ability to use that versus what took you a year. I'm curious to see what you think the difference would be.
Well, the biggest difference is after I'm long gone out of the organization, the team leader can continue to optimize using the same principles and practices and without having to calculate and figure out in their head. Though it took a year, I relied very little on intuition. I just looked at the numbers, but because all the calculations and everything that had to do, the algorithms had to be essentially be done by hand, right? Through spreadsheets and numbers and formulas and everything like that. That's what took so long. And because it took so long, because of the dynamic nature of an operating company, people were coming in, coming out. I had to recalculate. Whereas now, if you have every team member inside the database, all you have to do is drag and drop. And then the algorithm that we were calculating is already programmed in to immediately pop up and give you either the team compatibility score. It'll show you visually where the gaps are and who you could drag in. And if you say, oh, what if I drag this person in? Fills the gap. Drag this person in? No, you just add another taskmaster. It's like, oh, okay, wait, pull this person out. And on top of that, if you don't even want to geek out on the gap spackling, you can just look at the ultimate score that's calculated and just play with that number, right? The hierarchy, the weights and everything like that, those are all have been laid out so that instead of relying on a human being that where there is a potential error. And over the course of a year, there was a couple times like, ooh, I calculated that one wrong. Oh, hopefully it's okay. No, I got to go in there. I got to change things again, right? Even though we know that, right? And that's the beautiful thing about human beings. We are perfectly imperfect. We can know this inside and out. And we think about all the things that you know inside and out, and you still made a mistake. That's the beautiful nature of being human. That's what contributes our ability to evolve and grow at a rapid pace. The fact that we can still make a mistake after having something dialed into our ecosystem. And what we're trying to do is eliminate, or what we are doing is we're eliminating that, take that out so you can stay as a team leader or as an organizational management leader, stay in that state of creativity to expand and not waste your time just managing conflict resolution or managing is the right team or intuitively doing it, which I've got nothing wrong with intuition. But again, even though it's intuition, it still relies on that human being being in a awake, healthy, well-rested state that's optimized, because our intuition can be skewed depending on our mental and emotional state of mind, right? We eliminate that. So what Maestro was designed to do was to take what oftentimes takes 90 or 100, half a year or 90 days or half a year or a year to do. And all you have to do is make sure everybody's in your database, click. This is what I want. Boom, minutes, seconds later even. And with Hi running in the background, can answering questions that we would normally answer. But if we're not available, and if you're not hiring us for $100,000 a year per person, then just use Maestro. Maestro will do it all. And that's really why we wanted to do this. It's like, yeah, but wait, doesn't that cut into your ability to make a ton of money and stuff like that? It's not about that. Our ultimate goal is to help as many human beings as possible. And if we're doing these large organizations, well, every organizational member, if they're seeing themselves optimized at work, the beautiful thing about our technology, it goes home with them, right? Team leaders, one of the biggest frustrating things is, yeah, I can optimize at work, but I can't control what they do at home. So guess what? If they're screwing up at home, guess what? Bye-bye. You bring it to work. We can't have that. Well, guess what? Now, a lot of my clients who are team leaders and they actually care about their people, they've often expressed to me before the technology came into my world, it's like, how do I help them outside of work? Do I just send them to you? I was like, yeah, for now you can do that. And that's what was happening. But that became very costly for them because now they're paying for my time, not only for helping them optimize their business, but also optimizing their people on an individual basis, right? And so there's so many different ways before the technology came into our world was that, okay, we'll create office hours and this and that, and people drop in. It was like, it was so convoluted. There's so many different ways. Great. I made a lot of money, but was I truly serving in the best way possible? We want to be able to empower team leaders who care about their people, business owners who care about their people beyond just work. to create a culture that supports them both inside and outside of work. They can get optimized work and take those same principles home, and it will still apply.
And still have Lisa in their pocket.
And still have Lisa in their pocket.
Yeah. I've joked about this with you, and it's actually very true. But I've said, if I had Maestro, if I had this app when I owned my business, I wouldn't have sold it, because it was the most frustrating part of being a leader, being an entrepreneur, is trying everything you think you can to help optimize people and still getting it wrong. And I have admitted I'm not the best at intuiting what's going on with people, but you can give them the opportunities at work. You can tell them you care about them. You can give them raises and healthcare and all these things, but you still don't really know what's going on in their world, in their head, and why they're showing up a certain way. So I am glad I sold my business. I'm glad I'm here doing this now, but it is an absolute game changer. So you talked about a number of different parts there. Let's go high level, talk about each one, because there's a couple of key ones. You mentioned high, and I know we mentioned that on last week's episode too, so we can get there. But hiring has got to be one of the most costly parts of running a business, especially a large organization where there's a ton of people, and you might get it wrong 40% of the time. Talk to me about hiring within Maestro, what you designed it to do and what you hope that evolves into in both small and large businesses.
So I viscerally know how hard it is to hire people. I used to run a management sales organization where we had developed a philosophy that I was interviewing every day of the week, because we were hiring for sales staff that would go out into the field. And I saw a very abysmal statistic that out of 100 people that I hire, the stickiness would be like 5, maybe.
I hate that stat.
It is terrible, but I just said, well, that's how it's got to be. And so I found myself to be a professional interviewer. And what I found as I was interviewing these people day in, day out, is that there are people who are brilliant interviewers. And I was hiring for salespeople, so why wouldn't they, right? Their resume, which I then eventually refer to as list of lies. But then you put them into the field and you start to observe them as human beings as they operate, and you see why certain people burn out, because they've learned. See, here's the pros and cons of being human, right? The pro is human beings are amazing. I mean, we can learn and be taught and trained to do just about anything. The cons, human beings are amazing. And we can learn and be taught and be trained to do just about anything. It is a double-edged sword. But just because we can be taught and learn to do it, because we have the faculties to be able to adopt someone else's way of doing things, it doesn't mean that we are meant and designed to do that. You can certainly absolutely take a Lamborghini off-road, off-payroad, dirt, driving up rocks up to a mountain. But what do you think that will do to the lifespan of that Lamborghini?
Just make sure it's a rental, please. Don't do that to your own.
Yeah. Same thing with human beings, right? This is where we hear the terms like, I just can't win. It's like, I am so burnt out. There is absolutely no reason why human beings stepping into a career that is meant to support their ultimate life's goals, that same instrument of facilitation of that, whether it be financial or just, personal growth, should burn them out before they can enjoy what they're using that vehicle for. That is the premise of what we're doing here. It's to empower people the ability to say, oh, wait. And we saw that again, like I was saying in the last episode, the pandemic, we saw that people waking up to like, I'm not happy doing this. I want to do something else. But then what? Right? There's no other tool. I can confidently say there's no other tool that can shortcut that. You can combine a whole bunch of tools that are out there currently, but there is no one tool that can very efficiently and very precisely shortcut that and get you that. So when it comes to hiring, okay, what we're looking at then is that you've got very clear ways to distinguish between who are the doers, who are the leaders, who are the strategists, who are the motivators, who are the nurturers, who are the resource specialists who have this plethora of knowledge in their mind. We can identify all of that. And so if you can understand that those are the types of human beings out there and the different weights that they bring to the table, because some could be multiple, they could be, a lot of them are multi-talented, and you can see the range of that before they even come in for an interview. How efficient do you think It will be. So it's gotten to a point right now. So a lot of my clients, they don't even go with standard roles anymore because of the technology. It's afforded them the ability to create a custom role for people that they think are a great fit as a human being in their culture first. And then look at the skills that they naturally bring to the table. And then my clients will say, okay, I want this person to do this and this and this role, because they know that if they create a custom role that aligns with their natural potential, there is a much lower probability of burnout, which means your retention level goes up, right? So for retention purposes, for a precision of hiring, we've been able to help organizations. So the standard that the standard statistic out there is that when you hire a new person full-time on a salary, 60% of that first year is spent on onboarding and training and helping them kind of refine their roles and get them to understand. 60%. So that means if you hire somebody for $250,000 a year, right? That's what? 6, 5, 30, 90,000.
$250,000. You could have said 100,000.
100,000. Okay.
So much easier.
$60,000 of that money is already spent on making sure that they are a fit. Heaven forbid that something happens in industry, and I use this because it literally happened to somebody in a networking group that I was in. A year and a half later, you have to lay them off. So that means after a year or so, you only got 40% of your ROI, maybe, but you're laying them off. So did you really get an ROI? Now laying them off after a certain period of time because of the nature of HR and stuff like that, now you've got severance. Now you've got unemployment. In essence, you lost money and you put all that money in for nothing. What we've seen happen is when people hire more precisely using our technology and more efficiently, that 60% drops to as low as half. And if you really take the time to use the technology to understand how to reform the way you filter, or not filter, but the way you qualify people by using the language that's used in our technology as part of your evaluation process, you can elicit and bypass the professional interviewers and the list of lies and really get to the core of what that human being is all about, how fatigued they are, how burnt out they are, or whether or not they're ready to go for your organization. And then you can almost potentially eliminate the cost of bringing somebody in new, because they can jump right in with a few short onboarding education and get right into the ecosystem.
And here's the piece of that calculation too, because everyone's aware of the 60%, or at least most people are aware of that. The piece that we fail to calculate is the opportunity cost of say hiring the wrong person. So let's use $100,000 because I'm way dumber at math than you are. I'm going to keep this simple. I appreciate you trying to shoot for the moon there with the $250,000 though. If you hire somebody, let's use sales for $100,000 a year.
$150,000, by the way.
What? That was the 60%, $150,000. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for plugging that hole in my mind. You hire someone for $100,000. You expect them to produce $1 million, let's say, and results in their first year, they only produce 100,000. You could have hired the right person. This is the opportunity cost for the same 100,000 who would have produced $1 million. You didn't just lose the 100,000. You lost over $1 million in the opportunity cost.
Yep.
That is the piece that's a sales example, but this happens in every role. The expected ROI for that individual by hiring incorrectly is often 3 to 5 times, if not more, higher than what you just calculated right there. That's a scary calculation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it really depends on because that's the performance ROI. Every human being that you bring into an organization is an investment. Okay. And if you're not running these numbers when you're going out there and expanding and building your team, that's a recipe for disaster, because there are people who haphazardly hire without thinking about what's the ROI, what's the expectation of this. And it's not to say that, human beings are like, we depersonalize the process, because a very important piece of the ROI is, are they contributing to the evolution and the improvement and the growth of the culture, right? And so when I'm talking about ROI, I'm not just talking about dollars, right? I'm talking
yeah.
about overall the entire ecosystem. Does it contribute to the core values? Does it contribute to the company being able to grow in a way that makes sense beyond just money, right? The stickiness of sustainability and all those different pieces. So when we look at that, and you're not thinking about, okay, when this person comes in, that opportunity cost you're talking about, Brandon, so many people don't do enough of that to recognize that, hey, this is more than just whatever I'm spending every single year on this person, right? I'm investing. And I think that's the first step, is to stop seeing people in your organization as a cost or liability. Human beings that come in are an investment, right? You're investing in them to be in alignment with the goals of the organization as a whole. So everybody, including that investment, can evolve and grow together, right? Those are the people that we've eventually said, okay, those are the only types of organization we want to work with. Now with our SaaS and Maestro technology, I mean, anybody can use it. So we'll see how, hopefully through those channels and through the technology, we can inspire people to step into that, because I think that's the next evolutionary state of corporate America, is not just the bottom line and the dollar, but what is the impact? What is the consciousness of that impact that you're going to make in the world, so that the people in your organization thrive just as much as your customers thrive, just as much as your legacy of what it is you're creating in the world thrives.
Yeah, I think corporate fails to realize that the bottom line, the profit, is a byproduct of optimized human beings. It's not, it shouldn't be the focus. But when you put it as the focus, humans often suffer. When you put humans first,
Yeah.
your byproduct is often way more significant. So we hope to change that. We
Yeah.
have in the companies we've worked for. There will be more of that to come. Let's talk about those human beings as a group before we wrap up. The compatibility score. This to me is super cool, because that's what you can't tell from an interview, unless it's some extended interview period where you have them actually sample the role for days or weeks at a time. It's really hard to tell if someone's actually compatible and they're going to add
Right.
to the culture, like we talked about before. So how is that going to work on Maestro? And also, do you think me and you are compatible? What's our compatibility score?
Our compatibility score is actually pretty high, just because of the nature of how we show up and where we like, what traits or gears we actually like to be in, right? We're both considered what we call high performance vehicles, in the sense like we like to go fast, we're agile, and we like to kind of shift things on the fly. We're not intimidated by challenges in the world, because, like I was saying earlier in a previous meeting, we hit a wall, we'll just reverse and let's just keep going, right? That's just kind of the nature of how, God or the universe created us physically. When we were birthed into this world, we were born to be together. No, so
Turned into a romance podcast.
Yeah,
Real
like a
quick.
romance podcast. Yay! No, but do you want me to talk about like the high level geekery of how it works?
I love geekery. I'm never going to say no to that.
Okay.
I hope the listeners appreciate that too.
Okay, so I'll just break it down. I mean, it's just pulling back the curtain of Oz of how we're actually doing this through the lens of the technology. Now, the algorithm is algorithm, so we're taking the algorithm that already exists that identifies the unique nature of two human beings. How the compatibility score works is this: let's say you have a team of 5, right? And you take one person, and what High does on the back end is it takes one person and creates a score with each individual score with each person. When those individual scores are calculated based on a hierarchy of weights and measures that we have in terms of the physics and the mathematics calculation from the algorithm, then we get the average and the mean score, and we compare. Okay, then it determines whether the mean and average are close enough to use them, or if it's not, then we find. So it's a lot of statistical stuff that anybody who takes statistics know I'm talking about. You look at the average, you look at the mean, and you see which one is, if there's too much of a deviation, then you have to pick the mean. If it's not enough deviation, just pick the average, right? And then that's when we get that score of that person compatibly with the rest of the team. Now you do the same thing for every other team member with everybody else, and then you get all these scores together, and that combines then once again, average or means, and then we determine that score that way, and that ultimately produces, out of 100, a specific score compatibility. 100 obviously being 100% compatible, which we probably will never see because everybody human being is different, down all the way to like 1 or something like that. Anything below 30, we highly recommend don't even go there, right? If you have limited resources, they have to be, even if that limited resources, okay, let's put it this way. If you have limited human resources and this is all you have, and it's still below 30, that's when we highly recommend either really looking into bringing in somebody to either replace or fill in a gap, because it's just going to be really, really hard, and it's going to cost more to optimize than to kind of bring in more people or identify what you can replace, right? There's huge gaps that are happening. So the numbers we're going to look at is to honor the law of 3, the law of 7, and the base 10 reality that we live in. So it's all comes down to math anyway. So we look at scores of 30 or more, then 70 or more is ideal, right? So anything between 30 and 70, say, okay, maybe try again, shuffle around some more, right? What high will do, so there's 2 modes. You could do auto mode, or high will just automatically scour your entire database and what you're looking for and automatically put the most optimal team and will suggest that team for you. But there are a lot of tinkerers out there. They want to do it themselves. That's fine too. High will then just help you calculate the score. And then you can say, ooh, okay, cool. I like that. I'm okay with 73, but this, fine, right? Obviously, when you get to 80, 90, 100, then you're like, you have a pretty good success rate on this one. It just requires to make sure that everybody keeps themselves optimized. So that's the beautiful thing. We send the team leader, this technology is meant to go home with the people, so they have it on their phones and everything. And their responsibility as human beings to maintain this compatibility score is season after season. Every 90 days, they get to see, are they continuing to stay optimized? If not, that compatibility score will change. So from one season to the next, if the team leader was going, okay, let's see how they're doing this season, going into this season, right? Think of the power of understanding from every 90 days to the next. A team leader, all they have to do is check in, see the number, did it shift and change? And I'll also highlight someone who hasn't taken the assessment yet this season, prompt them to take it, make sure that you get a new score. And if the score is still good, moving along. Think about the agility of the human culture of an organization from one season to the next, so we don't get blindsided 2 years down the road and say, but I thought this was a good hire. It's like, yeah, but they're obviously not honoring themselves. They're not taking care of themselves. And think about what the wellness programs will now look like inside organizations, because then it's a win-win-win situation. The human being is supported, which means the company and the teams are supported, which means like the customers are then supported as well. The possibilities are endless with just that compatibility score. And this is just one small component of the entire Maestro suite of optimization tools that we have.
I'm absolutely over the moon excited for this to officially be released, which brings me to, well, looking back a little bit, you said you used to work with companies for up to $100,000 per person. This is not that expensive. It's actually far less. And surprise, it's in beta. So yes, we wanted to talk about it this episode and give you a sense of how to use it in your business and where it came from, where it's moved to in a SaaS model. You guys have been doing this for 20 years. You and Lisa together for 10. Now the little baby of Maestro app is born. It's here. It's in beta. And for those of you listening or watching, it is time to check it out. So you can go click below. There will be a link somewhere, wherever you are. Join the beta. Get the extra special perks, join our beta breaker club, and try it out in your business. But this, I can't even tell you how excited I am. And we're going to keep rolling out more episodes with all the different parts of the suite that get rolled in. We'll talk more about high. Before I let you go here, what's your favorite part of Maestro so far? Favorite piece that's in beta?
Currently, my favorite piece is the graphical representation of the human being, which is a precursor to our HumanOp ID encryption technology.
We didn't even talk about any of that. This is crazy.
I know. This is the human. I actually had this conversation to break down a little bit of the early algorithm that we have. We're talking about a 4-dimensional encryption technology for every human being's identification, right? I actually shared this with somebody who has a cybersecurity company. He owns that company, and I broke it down kind of high level. I said, does that make sense? Because I was looking, he goes, this is brilliant. Nobody's doing this. I was like, I know. And we can, because we are science-based. We are mathematical based. And in which case, calculating the algorithm is an easy port over for any kind of like computer development platform. And so all we need to do is take advantage of the fact that we are a three-dimensional technology, layer on the blockchain encryption technology we have on the back end for all the database to tokenize and create immutable contracts with every piece of data. And so you put all that together, it literally creates a four-dimension. I know people talk about four-dimension being time travel, whatever, but it's like a four-layer technology built on a three-dimensional representation, holographic representation of a human being. So what some of the most exciting thing that I have right now is currently we're able to visually display a very watered down version to our clients and our participants in our retreats and everything like that of what we call the spider graph 3D representation of that human being. So you can, at a glance, identify the strengths, weaknesses, and the gaps that need to be filled between one human being and another, and how complementary and supportive they are with each other. So that's one of the most exciting things that is coming. The performance ROI metric, which we haven't talked about, that's even more exciting because that's my little baby right there to basically help every team leader calculate and determine every human being's unique ROI metric the moment you hire them and bring them on, so that you don't have to worry about comparing one person to another person for results around their results. So
it looks like we have more to discuss on future episodes, because those two things I'm also excited for. We didn't even talk about performance ROI, maybe like a little bit when you were manually calculating it, but yeah, we got to unpack that.
Yeah,
for sure.
For sure. Yep.
Last question. You can't have an intro without an outro. And it sounds like you weren't a huge fan of the intro. Are you ready for the outro to this podcast?
I am ready. So here we go.
Let's do it. For those of you watching, listening, thank you again. I'm so glad you're joining us for Running with Scissors. Subscribe. We'll see you on the next episode next week.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Running with Scissors. Have you downloaded the HumanOp app yet? Head over to humanop.com to experience the power of this technology for yourself. See you on the next episode of Running with Scissors.